Approximately 6 miles northeast of Mullen Head is the island of Innistrahull. The group of rocks nearest the mainland is the Garvan Isles. Although uninhabited since around 1928, this island has a very special place in the hearts of many people, particularly those who have ancestral connections with the place.
I see the mountains, feel the salt air. I have reason.
This is Port de Hurry, with an island home in the background. We round Gull Island.
That never seems to be.
The entrance to Portmore Pier is from a northeasterly direction. Here we see where the first lighthouse was situated on the island, and we can still see the buildings where the lightkeepers lived. The perimeter wall encloses the land where the lightkeepers grew their vegetables and grazed their cows.
You're as rugged as the sea.
The central part of the island was known to the locals as a lagan. There is 60 acres of arable land here, 20 acres of pasture and 30 of mountain or rock. The island has become a very popular destination for people to visit.
There are places that will bring you to your knees.
People come here to experience the peace and tranquility.
I hear voices.
Others come to look at the old houses, to seek out the flora and fauna, and maybe catch a glimpse of the few deer that live here.
I caress you, Mother Ireland.
The Island School, built in 1901, it could cater for up to 60 pupils. The Master's House, the only two-storey building on the island. The last master here was a Mr. Dennis McCallion from Glengad. That schoolmaster, is there any other breed of him about McCallion?
He was from Malin Town, or this side of Malin Town, McCallion. No, he was married and he'd one son and he's dead. If he was living now he'd be 84. I knew him, I don't know what, he was in a wheelchair.
When a fella and girl announced that they were getting married, the rest of the islanders would come together and build them their house. That was the wedding present, yes.
With regard to the individual family houses, this is where the McGonigal family lived. James McGonigal was contracted to transport the lighthouse employees on and off the island. Mallinwell was the favourite landing place for islanders in those early years. A contract like this would have been very valuable, as it provided a steady income to island families, something that was not readily available to islanders either then or now.
That was Biddy James. His wife went ashore to live in Malin Head, and she lived to the age of 100, and smoked her fill and drank her fill, and she could thread a needle until she was 100 without the use of glasses.
Donald Davy and his wife Annie, née Houghton, came to live in Drumhalla, a townland about 3 miles north of Rathmullan. Donald had become friendly with a local fisherman, Barney Billy, also a McLaughlin, but no relation as far as we know. Donald's son Mick, who was born in Inistrahull, married a local girl. They lived in Rathmullan, and there are quite a few of their families still living locally.
Donald went to Rathmullan, and Mickey and wee Davy went to Fleetwood. The fished out of Fleetwood, you know, in trawlers, Fleetwood trawlers, you know. Mickey's son, I think, he was a skipper there. They're all very clever people, you know, island people. Great storytellers. Mightn't be all through, but Mickey Big was an uncle of Donald Davies and Mickey Davies, and he was in the First World War in British Army. Now through the war, then after the war was over, he come back and he come to Ireland and he joined the Free State Army. He was a settler, betrayed in the army. That was his job.
Yeah, good.
He lived in Dublin then, and nobody ever could trust him. They couldn't. Wee Davy come over from Fleetwood to Dublin to look for him. Somebody directed him to some of the pubs, and they went there, and the barman said, "There's a picture on the wall of a man with a white beard on him." And then they said, the barman said, "That must have been him there."
Right, so
That's all they knew about him.
buried in Dublin, I suppose.
Aye. He never come back, eh?
The cage bed, yes. That was Nellie Ruiz.
Nellie Ruiz. Nellie Ruiz's house is situated on a fairly precarious site on your right hand side as you approach Portmore. Nellie was born around 1830. She was McLaughlin, and as was the custom in those days, where a number of families had the same surname in a locality, nicknames were used to distinguish between those families. In Nellie's case, the Ruiz probably referred to hair colour. Other nicknames referred to the father's or grandfather's Christian names. Nellie Ruiz was married to Mickey Daniel Neil McLaughlin from Bulbin and Mallinhead.
Oh, Nellie Ruiz, man, he was drowned coming out from Mallinhead. He's come from Mallinhead on the boat and he slipped and fell out.
Oh.
He was lost.
There was a cage bed to the rear of the house, which was a recess in the back wall, into which a bed was put. Because of the recess, the bed didn't take up any floor space in the kitchen, which meant it was a warm place for an elderly person or a sick person either. A noticeable aspect to these cage beds was how short they were, which would lead you to wonder, did people sleep in a partly upright position, which would have been of benefit to a person with breathing difficulties. Nellie's daughter Ellen married John Donovan, a signalman with Lloyd's. Their son John, born in 1914, worked as a radio officer on the island. Later he played with the very popular band, the Seaside Serenaders. He also recorded a number of songs which became favourites on Radio Éireann, the national radio station.
For my neighbours, well, Charlie Tackett lived above me and they come in there in 1910. Lived up the road there, Portline, Glencat. He'd be here with me every day. That's what he wanted to talk about the island, you know.
Was he lonely for the island, do you think?
Huh?
Was he lonely for the island? Did he miss it?
He was, aye.
Well, how did they manage to get a place here?
It was a council cottage that time in 1910 or 11, a labourer's cottage. They got that. But then other people got houses here and there, you know. Vacant houses. But they weren't too hard to house.
Well, did Charlie Taker go back out to the island much in your time?
Aye, Burton, and he had a boat there. And I was out with him a few times, like when he had the boat when he was younger. Used to go out with him. They all missed the island, you know. They must have been good boatmen, you know. His father, I knew Charlie's father too very well, old Johnny. And he told me about coming into Mallinhead to get confirmed. And there were three boats come in. And they're all for confirmation. Nobody come with them.
Just the youngsters?
Aye. And he was the skipper of one boat. And he said coming into Mallinhead, be able to take off the other, and it was too heavy for him to take off the boat, and it fell into the water and lost it. And then they stole a Mallinhead man's rudder when they were leaving, and they got into trouble then, he says, at least confirmation. Stealing somebody's rudder.
So he had to get out home again?
Aye. I said to him, I said, you must do, You must have been fairly big, and then he started to explain to me about the others. That was the size he was, you know. And I said, you should be big. No, I said, we weren't. I said, they got some pennies when they were leaving the island, you know, to buy things, and there were 4 of them staying with some old woman for the night, stay overnight. And they were to buy her a half pint of whisky, you see, out of their money. And they went to the pub, I don't know where, to be Farron's or somewhere that time, and one wouldn't trust the other with the money, and they went all in and put down their penny or something on the counter. That was sort of sense they had, you know, then. You could imagine. There must have been good seafaring. He told me about some other woman one time. Some man on Slabane and Mallinhead was getting married. But he was marrying a young girl, you know. And there was great noise about the wedding, so I think they came in 3 or 4 boats from the island onto the wedding, to see the wedding. And they were up along the road, must be a mile from the Slieve Band to the chapel. And there were men away in front of the wedding who were up digging swords with spades along the road, with a sword in their old boy on the chanting car, on the chanting car going up. And they sworded the life out of him. And then they were all gathered inside the wall of the chapel round there along the road. They were all in there, packed up, they were all in there waiting to get in, and the priest come to open the door, and he knew what they were all about, you know. He started to push them back. And he said there were that many people in it that they went back again the wall along the road, and the whole wall just tumbled out on the road with the weight of people.
Well, my mother, you know, was one of the takers, and she was born on the island. She left the island when she was 9 years old. You know, she always said she was 9 years old. I don't know where they went from there. I think they went into Mallinhead, and then they wind up down in Bunt and Glengad, the place they call Bunt down in Glengad. The takers wind up there, my mother. Well, Houghton, you know, old Patrick Houghton was my grandfather's name. Patrick Houghton's wife was Rosie Duffy, I think was her name before she was married, my grandmother.
And was she from the island as well?
Yeah, she must have been, you see, because they were married on the island. That's where the family, they had, and there were many kids. They had there was a few kids, because my mother wasn't, I don't know if my mother was the oldest one in the family or not. There was three boys and 2 girls.
And this nickname of Taker, what is the...
Well, it came about taking the boat, you know, going back to the one, I think. That's where they got their name. Tacking, you know, back and forth.
Probably good sailing?
Well, you'd have to be a good boatman around the island, or you wouldn't be there long. Dangerous spot, you know.
Near Taker's house was a fish curing station, established by the Congested Districts Board sometime in the 1890s. This initiative was intended to complement the island fishery, as it meant the fish did not have to get to market as quick as fresh fish. It also added value to the catch. Presumably the pool close by was a holding tank for the fish, while the curing station was ready for them. This is where a McLaughlin family lived, where the head of the house was known as Daniel Catherine Ned. There is some out-office buildings to the right of the house, which may have been used to house some livestock.
That is wee Davy's house.
Don went to Rathmullan, and Mickey and wee Davy went to Fleetwood, went England. And the fish out of Fleetwood, you know, and trawlers, Fleetwood trawlers, you know. Mickey's son, I think, he was a skipper there, out of Fleetwood.
Overlooking Portahory is Wooly John Phillips' house. Wooly John was a McLaughlin also. This house looks a little more exposed to the southwesterly gales than some of the other houses. But then shelter was not easily got on this island. What about that man from the Isle of Doe that married the woman in Ireland?
Harry. Don't know what become of him, where he went, I don't know. Left the Isle of Doe and come out then. He built that house. That was the last house built on the island.
Lone is the house now, and lonely the moorland.
I don't know what become of him.
Men are scattered, the old folk are gone.
The king was Barney McGonagall. Say, he was a great big man with a white beard on him, a great big white beard. Very mild man when he was sober, but he could change the opposite way when he was drunk. And he always wore a big belt round him and a butcher's knife stuck on it. That was his way. Then when he'd get drunk, he'd go and take out the gun and he'd start shooting round in all directions. Scaring everybody.
Yeah.
He may be one of them kind of men, you know, they had to have a king anyway. And he might have been the best for the job.
Overlooking Portmore is Mary Duffy's, or in its English form, Mary Duffy's. We don't have much information on the Duffys, other than what John Doherty Liza has to say about his grandmother.
Patrick Houghton was my grandfather's name. Patrick Houghton's wife was Rosie. Rosie Duffy, I think, was her name before she was married. My grandmother.
And was she from the island as well?
Yeah, she must have been, you see, because they were married on the island. That's where the family, they had, and there were many kids. They had there was a few kids because my mother wasn't, I don't know if my mother was the oldest one in the family or not. There was three boys and 2 girls.
The Argodelos was bound to Cuba for a cargo of sugar in 1962, and he mistook the Tor Locks on the chart. He was using the old chart when the lighthouse was at the east end, but then the lighthouse was changed over the new light at the west end, and he came in too close and went on the Tor Rocks, and there was none of the crew lost. The ship broke in half and it was being towed to the Clyde, and it sank off Glengad.
That old lady, Betty, Johnny Taker's sister, now she's married to Baker. She was in America before she got married. She came back then and got married. And she was telling me she went out on a boat and there were cattle on the boat. And the old boat was leaking. And they were at the cabin, she was in with 2 other girls, they were up to the knees in water. And the old manure of the cattle was washed down through it.
And what made her come back at all?
She didn't come back to get married anyway, because she said that Baker, the night before she left to go back to America again, Baker asked her to marry and she stayed. She'd rather live with him than go to America.
I live out of this world, far from the land. A lightkeeper, they ask. They shake my hand. It must be lonely out there. They do not understand. For rockbound by the tide and free from the throng, sweet peace fills my breast the whole day long. Every window's wind whistle is a blackbird's nesting song.
And of course there's always a problem about getting priests out of the island. The priests in this part of the world usually came from County Derry and never knew anything about the sea.
Oh, I see.
And they're afraid of it. And so then on Sundays then people would gather at the Mass Rock at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock and they'd pray. So and the same thing would happen, say, during, if somebody was lost at sea, they would gather at the Mass Rock and start to pray. But occasionally a priest did go out, but it was pretty rare, you know, pretty rare.
We were out there one time there, a few years ago, they had a mass out there. A big mass out there, oh Christ, it was crowded. I went from here with my boat. The mass was up on a high rock there. You could see all the way down, it's up above the school there, the old school.
Was that mass for like all the descendants of the families?
Yeah. They had organised their.
Glengad did it, Father Brady, and it was in Mellon, you know.
Oh, right.
Glengad people organised. Father
Big crowd in Mellon, beautiful day it
It
was.
was nearly 5,000.
I don't know if I could. I don't know about 5,000, maybe 1,500, maybe or 1,000. There was quite a few out there, though. Quite a few people.
What about making the potting? Did they make any potting?
A long time back. Possibly got badly out of Scotland or somewhere, you know. Way back when they'd be Stully then, you know, they'd be trading back and forth to Islay. And then we boats. Aye. Oh, they took barley back from there anyway. Might be still the breed of it in Malin Head. It was brewing barley. I don't know whether 3 rows or 4 rows, or I don't know what the difference was, you know.
This is what is known as a Jew's harp. The islanders would have got them from the sailing ships passing. No money would have changed hands. They did what they called bartering in them days. They would take fish and lobsters and crabs out to the sailing ships, and they in turn would give them tobacco, rum, sweets. That would be a novelty for the island. This is a poem written by my father. It's from a book of poems that he had published in 1947, and it was entitled Lightkeeper's Lyrics. Inistrahull. The moon shines on the isle of Inistrahull, bejeweling nuptial tinted herring gull, mayfly dancing in the balmy air, and moth returning to its daylight lair. A shoal of herring breaking out at sea, sparkle like hoarfrost on an aspen tree. The snail arboretum with his watery glue, and bunch of pearlwort in a crystal dew. The flaming sun ascends o'er Kintyre's mull, throws out his arms, day breaks on Inistrahull. During the time the islanders were on the island, there was no communications with the mainland, so they had no radio. That was unheard of. But Morse, that would be at night with a light. So the Lighthouse always had semaphore flags that they were able to send messages with. That would be them there, and that worked like your arms. That would be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. And that's how they communicated with the mainland in them days. They would send messages ashore, we'll say, for provisions. It was usually the shopkeeper in Malin Head, Barney Grant. He was able to read them. He had a telescope, and he was able to, he would just put up the flag that he got the message, like that, and everything was in order.
Approaching Inistrahull from the west, the rocks under the lighthouse are called Nastaki. Further along the southern edge of the island is Port de Hurry. Heading east is an open bay called Prockish. Just beyond is Poldu. Continuing east is the headland of Carrigower. Beyond that is the inlet of Irish Gullet. On the eastern tip of the island is Inishowen, or Gull Island. The main landing port on the island is Port Moore, with Port Beg just to the right of it. The high ground at the end of Port Moore is called Barrafort. Leaving Port Moore on the northern side is Illandu and Cairn na Hackester. Further along the northern shore is Port Naganav. The next inlet is Port Nabana. The two large rocks to the northwest of the island are called the Skerries, with the most northerly one called Sker Liam, and the one closest to the island called Sker Liamus. Just inside these rocks is a large inlet called Port Nahulla, with the Barley Rock off to the northwest. On the island itself, the high ground round where the old lighthouse was situated is called Kinnatui. The high rock formation behind the school is called Craignahulla. In the central lowland plateau, the Lagan. There is a type of rock found on the island which is quite striking in appearance, with a beautiful mix of pink and black components. This type of rock is not to be found anywhere else in Ireland, but in parts of Scotland and in particular the islands. We see a very good example of this rock here in the wall surrounding the school. Just beyond the old lighthouse site, overlooking Illanawillan, or Gull Island, is the island graveyard. It is a quiet, secluded place, facing east, and to quote John McGahern's book title, that they may face the rising sun. The graveyard is marked by a stone circle, with single stones indicating the grave sites.